welcome out to the Fargo Dome, the Gate City Bank Bison Football Green and Gold Preview Show as we are getting set for North Dakota State to wrap up spring practices. Pleased to have you out here. I am Alex Egan, Lee Timmerman, Brian Sean, Ryan Gellner, the whole crew here for you. Over the next 90 minutes, we're going to be talking about Bison football. And, guys, obviously the culmination of spring practices, 15 practices over the spring. And this is certainly a fun time for Bison football and for the fans that have come out here to take in the final practice.
Yeah, fun for the fans, very important for the coaches and the coaching staff and a lot of the new guys who are in place who we'll talk about. And, of course, a lot of new players that will be trying to earn positions from all of those seniors that graduated. But, yeah, fun for the fans, but certainly this is a real practice, a working practice, the last practice of the spring for the Bison coaches. So they still are evaluating and want things to get accomplished here tonight.
Absolutely. And, Brian, I said you were down there on the field as they were handing out the rings for their ring ceremony. It's kind of become a tradition here around these parts that spring football means ring ceremony.
Yeah, it does, and it's kind of a fun way, I think, to celebrate the end of spring ball is to bring some of these guys back that were a part of this run over the last 4 or 5 years. And what's the most amazing to me is to see how much the guys have changed physically that have left the program. Greg Menard looks skinnier than I am. He played at 240 pounds last year, and he's rail thin right now. And then you know, Blake Williams has lost 30 pounds. Luke Bacon has slimmed down. Dallas Freeman is slimmed down. There's a look at Menard. Look at him. He looks like he could play tailback right now.
Where did his shoulders go?
Right? It is fun to see a lot of the old faces here, Ryan. I know that you've seen some of these guys around here, but this is a fun time to see some of these guys come back in non-football form.
It is. It's really a reunion of sorts. 24 seniors gone from a year ago. Just 7 starters return. You talk about that group of seniors and even beyond, those guys that come back because they want to be a part of this. They want to be around this program. And Brian nailed it. A couple of those guys, look at how small Levi Jordheim has gotten on one side of your television screen. It's just really neat to see them come back. They want to be around this, and that says something about this program.
And Aaron Steidel, he still looks like he's eating plenty right now.
Yeah.
I think we caught a glimpse of him. Yeah. He's still keeping up the weight that he had when he played a couple of months ago.
Yeah, and of course, a couple of these guys are still hoping that they get a phone call here in the next 24, 48 hours from NFL teams that they can definitely try and show what they learned here at North Dakota State at the next level. So this is obviously a good time. We had the ring ceremony that came down, but one of the things that, as we'll take a look at this ring ceremony, one of the things I think is important to remember is how much work goes into this, and this is what they get, and it's a fun time. And yes, we don't have the coaching staff that was the staff that won this, but Matt Entz is still here, and they get to celebrate with their coach another championship run.
Yeah, it's certainly a transition time for a lot of people, including Matt with getting the head coaching job. But I know there's some compare and contrast that we were going to talk a little bit about, like when Craig left and went to Wyoming and all of that stuff, and Coach Kleiman came in as the head coach. I actually think that there's more in place right now. I don't know, maybe Brian agree or disagree. I think there's maybe more people and more parts in place now than when you look back when Coach Kleiman took over.
Well, there's no question from a coaching staff perspective that there are more guys here that participated. Keeping a guy like Randy Hedberg, Tyler Roll, these guys have been around the program a long time, where all that was left when Chris Kleiman took over was Nick Gazer, who was still pretty new, and Connor Riley, who was still pretty new, and both of those guys actually moved position groups when the new head coach took over. So, yes, was there more pieces in place? I think from a coaching staff standpoint, I'd have to say yes. But from a player standpoint, I would actually say the 14 team probably had more guys back with experience than what this group does. We kind of knew who was going to be the quarterback in waiting in Carson Wentz. We don't necessarily know who that is right now. We knew still had guys like Kyle Emanuel around here, guys that have played a lot of football that maybe we discounted a little bit going into the 14 season. And that group, I think, really picked it up where it left off, and it started with Iowa State down in Ames.
What I think is interesting, and I wasn't here when 14 happened. I wasn't here for the 13 run and to 14, but from everything that I've read and I've seen, it is eerily similar. 13, they go on this historic run. You have to replace a all-time winning FCS quarterback. That's what they're having to do again this year. You have the coaching changes. You have a ton of seniors that left. Is this the same vibe? Is this the same feeling that you're getting, 5 years ago even, right?
For me, it is the same, but it's a lot different. And it's different because of the history that has now stacked up year after year after year. We now expect this team to just turn things around, come back with these 7 starters, somehow find the other 10, 11, 12 guys that need to fill in, grab that depth, and continue to win national championships. If that can happen, I don't know. This team has proved, and they've done it before, proved that they can continue to repeat national championships. But so in that regard, it's the same, but it's a little bit different just because of the history perspective now.
I think that's a very good point. And when you talk about the history of the program, and to help illustrate this, I'm going to bring up the guys from down south in Brookings, because last year when Coach Stig's team got beat here, Stig went on and on about, you know, losing Christian and all the things that Jackrabbit team did and that they accomplished, and how they were precedent setting for the program of the Jackrabbits, and how 2 years in a row they made it to the Final Four. And you sit there and you think, okay, that's the best the Jackrabbits have ever been. Now think of, during this run that the Bison are on, what's the worst NDSU has done? That's a Final Four game.
Yeah.
So to put it in perspective about how grand and how big and how sometimes we take for granted what is going on right here, right now, I think that puts it in perspective.
That
Well
really
said.
does put it in
Well
perspective.
said.
Yeah, that's the best way to illustrate it is you mentioned these programs, even a James Madison saying, look what we're able to accomplish. We won a championship and we got to a championship. And this program setting, yeah, that we've done that like 5, 8, 7, 8 times here. Like, it's just one of those things where we have the annual pilgrimage to Fargo, and you think, from Fargo to Frisco, and you think, yeah, we're just what we're going to do. It's not easy to do it, though. And I do think the fan base has understood and started to embrace the fact that it was a special run, and then sending Chris Kleiman on his way the way they did, I think that was also a very unique situation for him as well.
You brought up James Madison. James Madison did an off-season poll with their fans as far as kind of the Super Bowl of their wins, and they ranked the win over North Dakota State in the semifinals higher than they ranked their national championship. That tells you about this place.
Well, yeah, just the run that is on here, and obviously, like I said, I joined this midway, you know, so to see it, but you have to be able to just appreciate what has gone down here at North Dakota State, and honestly, when you take a look at some of the fellas that they got coming back here, you think, well, boy, we could see 8 and 9. You know,
that's the group right there that
Yes.
a lot of people are looking at. If that quarterback group, if they can find a leader out of that, Alex, then people, I think, feel pretty good. Don't you guys think?
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about that quarterback group and what differences they bring to this table and what you know, their strengths and weaknesses are as a quarterback group. But I do agree that obviously that was the big
the wild
difference.
card.
That was the big difference in from 14. You knew you had Carson Wentz coming in, and in this year, well, who's going to replace Easton Stick? Because you knew you had Easton to back up Carson.
That's the million-dollar question. And I'll tell you this, all the coaches we have talked to, LT, you'd have to say the same thing. They're not tipping their hand, and they may.
I don't think they know.
And I don't think they really do know. And I don't think we're going to know. And even talking to Tyler Roll today, you and I had a chance to sit down with him. It may be 10 days before the first game before we really know who's going to be the starting quarterback. And I think that's the right way to go about it as well. I think they truly wanted to be an open competition. They want to give guys every single rep, every single opportunity to go out there and make an impression, and they wanted to split them evenly to make sure everybody has their chance.
And honestly, I think that all 4 of these guys has the potential to be a starter literally anywhere else in the country, and they're going to be a backup at North Dakota State. 3 of them will be backups at North Dakota State. And you think of a guy like Cole Davis, who could have been a starter really anywhere in the country, but he stayed at North Dakota State because he was about this program. And I think that's what they have. They have 4 guys that are about this program. And like I said, we'll get into that quarterback discussion a little bit later on.
That's one of my favorite guys right there to talk to. I like Randy. I like him a lot.
Well, he's got a few choices to make over the summer and the fall as well. I'm sure he and Matt Entz will have some serious discussions about who to throw out there come August 31st when the season opens up at Target Field against Butler. All right, we're going to step aside. When we come back, we're hopefully going to see a little bit of football as the guys are warming up on the field right now. They're going to go into a little bit of a practice. We'll tell you about kind of the changes and how this won't actually be a spring game so much as it will be a spring practice. But please don't go anywhere. We hope you'll join us right after this. Welcome to the Gate City Bank Bison Football Preview Show here at the Fargo Dome as North Dakota State is wrapping up spring football practice. And obviously, this would normally be a spring game, but this is a spring practice. You get 15 sessions per the NCAA to work with your guys in sanctioned form, and that's what Matt Entz is planning on doing. He's not going to waste this as a scrimmage by any means. He wants this to be a practice. So what we're seeing is guys warming up now, and yes, they have donned their game jerseys, except for the quarterbacks that are still in the Don't Tackle Me red jerseys. But that's what is happening here as we are going to see mostly a practice. There's going to be a little bit of 7-on-7, which is good for some skill work, but you know, NDSU's not going to tip their hand and show anything here in spring practice, because I can guarantee you that they think, and probably are, there's some people from down south that are probably watching this and trying to get an idea of what's going to happen with NDSU this fall.
Yeah, the rest of the conference will be getting a tape of this, because if nothing else, they just want to see who's out there, what do they look like, what jersey numbers from this kid from last year. So that's part of it. The coaches don't want to tip their hands, but really just in terms of college football in general, spring games are almost a thing of the past, because as you mentioned, Alex, coaches don't want to give up such a coveted practice in order just to go hit each other a little bit more for some fans.
Yeah, and put on a show for the fans. And one of the things that I thought was interesting when I caught up with Coach Entz about halfway through spring football, he said, you know, I believe that you have a finite number of snaps that you can take, and if you use those up in a scrimmage or in when you're going NDSU on NDSU, if you use up those amount of snaps that you have, then you don't have those for the game in the fall. And it never really dawned on me how, you know, that's one way to look at it. But that's how Matt Entz looks at it. And it looks like we are getting some game action here, a little bit ahead of script, North Dakota State going here. So let's take a look at what we've got going on. Holden Hotchkiss at quarterback here, and well, this looks like some full-on football we got going here.
A little bit of thud. I mean, nobody will be tackling anybody, but yeah,
if you look at DJ Stewart, it's one of those new pieces at wide receiver, and that's one of those position groups we talked about today with Tyler Roll, LT, that is still kind of waiting for some guys to emerge. When you lose a guy like Darius Shepard, Christian Watson has been out with a foot injury again. They're hoping Phoenix Sproles can take a step forward, but this is a group right now that's still trying to find itself a little bit.
Trying to find some depth within the program. There are some true freshmen that are coming that may have an opportunity to kind of do what Phoenix Sproles did last year, come in really raw and then earn a spot on the field, which Sproles obviously did later on. But DJ Stewart's one of those guys, you're right, that T. Roll told us today. He goes, he hopes he emerges and forces us to find a spot for him somewhere on the field.
Because so good with the ball in his hands. Yep. That's the one thing they want to get some of these guys that are so electric with the ball in their hands.
So what North Dakota State is doing right now is called 7-on-7 with a pass rush. So this is giving an idea for the quarterbacks of, you know, some of the looks that they might get from a defensive front, and likewise, it's some of the looks that a defense might get from what an offense is doing. We see Trey Lance in there, Ty Brooks flanking him. That's a key piece that's coming back for this Bison football team, especially with the loss of, as we heard, Seth Wilson tearing his ACL. We'll talk a little bit about Seth later on in the show as well. But Seth Wilson will not be available for the Bison this year. So Ty Brooks is a big piece coming back for them.
There you see Ty, number 28 right there. It's real interesting with him because he is so explosive in nature that really, and we talked about it with Coach Roll a little bit, that if you just go, okay, we'll give him 12 more carries a game. Well, that might actually diminish his effectiveness when teams get an opportunity to see him and game plan for him more as the game goes on. So it's a little bit of a catch-22 with him because the way the Bison have used him has been very, very effective.
And again, a guy that has had some injury issues, you know, not a real big guy, is not as big as a guy like Lance Dunn or Bruce Anderson was in terms of the durability and taking some of the hits when you're trying to run A-gap power and those types of things. So I think they're going to have to spread out the workload a little bit. You see Sabian Clark, how much bigger that young man is, getting number 30 there next to Dimitri Williams. Another guy that's a senior that moved to tailback and that has some experience and redshirted last year. So there's some other guys who spread the reps around too. It's just a matter of who really emerges after another strong summer in the weight room and who in fall camp gets it done.
We see Noah Sanders here at quarterback getting a rep, and I think as the coaches will tell you, you know, they've been surprised by what each guy at quarterback has done this year. They've been surprised by what each guy is picking up each practice. So it's very interesting how this competition is playing out for North Dakota State, as we see our first look at Zeb Noland in a Bison uniform. He was a transfer that came in from Iowa State, and honestly, when he signed, Matt Entz had his press conference that said, hey, we signed this quarterback, and nobody really had an idea about him. But he comes from Iowa State, where he played a good game against Oklahoma, had a great game against Oklahoma's defense, which, honestly isn't all that hard to do. But Zeb Noland is another guy that's going to be vying for that spot.
We know the way the Bison quarterbacks have been such a big part of the run game the last few years. When you take a look at who is here right now, who is out there trying to earn that starting spot, Zeb has the arm talent. What he doesn't have is probably the ability to be a part of the running game right now, and his footwork. He's in the shotgun right now, but we know the Bison take a lot of snaps from under center. He has not done that. So that's where, Hotchkiss, Sanders may have the advantage. They've been here 3 years. They know what that footwork is. He's trying to learn it. Trey Lance has 1 year under it.
Absolutely. Let's go now to Ryan Gellner standing by with a Shields sideline report. Ryan.
Yeah, hi, Alex. Levi Jornheim is a former Bison football player, from walk-on to a captain last year, 120 career tackles for the Bison, looking all slim and looking good. Away from football, what's that adjustment been like for you, Levi?
It's been a little slower. It's been a lot less stressful. We definitely miss it, all as seniors and whatnot, but it's been a life adjustment, but we're getting used to it.
Your first game action would have come in a game like this. It probably seems like a long time ago, but what do you remember about the first time you strapped on the pads in a spring game like this?
It's kind of a surreal experience. Getting to have the fans out here, and lights and the refs, and everything kind of up to speed a little more, and get out of that practice mode is always fun. So
now that you can look back, going from a high school superstar to making your way into college and then becoming a starter on this football team, how much faster was the game for you?
It's a lot faster. In high school, especially defensively, there's a lot less rules. It just tackle the ball and don't let them score touchdowns. And here, you got to be at a certain place at a certain time, kind of thing. So it was a huge adjustment, but it's one everyone's got to make. So
catch us up with what you're doing now away from the football field. You're one of the many guys that has used football kind of as a springboard now into your profession, and you've got a real world job now.
Yeah, I'm working for Sterling Management in Fargo. They manage a real estate trust, so really enjoying that. And a lot of the life lessons I learned in football are definitely going to help me succeed here in the future. So
we appreciate the time. We'll let you catch up with your old teammates and watch some of the new guys as well. Enjoy this. Thanks for joining us, and glad to have you back, Levi.
Thank you very much.
Guys, that's Levi Jornheim. Back to you.
That is by far the longest interview answers, Levi Jornheim. You could probably take the last 4 years together, and they wouldn't be as long as the interview answers he just gave Ryan right there.
Oh. In fact, Levi, we talk about the transition though from last year's team to this year's team, and when I walked into the Fargo Dome, or they came back and started stretching, I looked over, I saw 45, and I did the double take, and it's like, wow, okay, that's not him, right? I'm like, that is not Levi, and so it's like, okay, get over it,
Yeah.
You, meaning pointing at myself, need to help take that next step.
Absolutely. All right, we'll step aside. We come back. We got much more to come here from the Fargo Dome as the Bison are wrapping up spring practice. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the Gate City Bank Bison football preview show here at the Fargo Dome. The Bison are still in 7-on-7. It looks like they are moving to field goals at the moment. So we get a chance to see who's going to take over for Cam Peterson, because Cam was such a rock for the Bison over the last 4 seasons.
Yeah, you talk about question marks. This is obviously one of those question marks, questions that need to be answered.
So right here we have the first one going in. Is that Jake Reinholtz?
That is Jake Reinholtz, sophomore from Fargo, went to Shanley High School. And interestingly enough, he actually has kicker competition. There is a freshman that graduated from high school early, the kicking recruit for North Dakota State.
Yeah, that came at semester,
That came at semester break, and he's been here this entire semester and has gone through spring drills, which should elevate, at least help him in that competition here moving into the fall.
That kicker that you're talking to is Griffin Crosa, came from Powell, Ohio, excuse me. So we're going to see some things here.
Well, Reinholtz kicked just a couple of extra points last year, so we haven't seen him kick a field goal in game action.
While there's a break in the action, let's hear a word from Nodak Insurance Company.
Insurance answers should come easily. from an agent you know and trust. Like a Nodak agent. Nodak Insurance Company. Agents with answers.
Crosa there with a PAT field goal. They're moving him back here. So this will be interesting because it has been Cam Peterson's job over the last 4 years for the Bison kicking. So this is our first look at Crosa, who got here a little early.
Worked out well for him. He got a chance to go to the White House with the team.
I noticed that was Zeb Nolan, too. I saw a photo that, you know, there was a photo that I saw 5 quarterbacks in it, and I thought, who is the other guy on the end? Well, Zeb, who came in at semester, was able to go to that White House visit as well, as they look like they are wrapping up with that.
Let's not underestimate, though, how big of a, I shouldn't say drop-off, but how many points Cam Peterson put on the board for North Dakota State. Of course, we remember his big kicks, but he's the all-time leader in extra points at NDSU. And, boy, if you're getting 6 instead of 7 when you come down the field, all of a sudden that field goal kicker, guys, and that extra point kicker becomes a huge part of this offense. And that's a big hole that not many people are talking about right now.
Also leading scorer, too, in the Missouri Valley, like in the history of the conference.
Those points count.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to take it, man.
Yeah. I'd say the one thing with Peterson that if you can take a kicker for granted, that's a good thing. Touchdown, everybody roars. Cam walks out there, he'll make this.
Yep.
As opposed to the kicker walks out there, you cross your fingers and go, wow, I wonder if he's going to make this or not. But he was reliable, and taken for granted is not a bad thing, especially when you're talking about PATs.
Nothing will ever top the winner at Iowa. I can tell you that because I was there.
Oh, man.
But he's had some other big ones in the national championship as well.
Absolutely. So we talked about this White House visit that happened for the Bison, and I think that's something that we should not gloss over. As an FCS team, you just don't get invited to the White House. That's reserved for your pro teams, for your college football playoff champions, Alabama's, Clemson. That's seemingly who it's always been. But this is such an amazing moment and opportunity for a lot of these guys. And I know everyone that we talked to said it was surreal. That was the word that they kept using, was how surreal it was that they were in the White House.
The other thing I liked about is the way that this team and that group of people played their hand. Coach Entz and Levi and everybody that Beth talked with when she was there. This is not about us. This is about everybody who has played and won a championship at North Dakota State. And it's taken, you know, this long for us to get here, and without them, we're not here. So thank you, everybody. Not just look at what we did.
Yeah, Greg Menard was the one that even said that. He goes, you kind of feel bad, so to speak, because you're getting the fruits of a lot of labor that happened before you got here. But at the same time, I think it was fitting with what happened with this group and everything, that it was the right timing for it to happen, because all of a sudden we're on coach 3 now of this run, and we're still rolling. That's hard to believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of coach 3, that was another big topic of the offseason, was the fact that Chris Klieman moved on to Kansas State. And, you know, Matt Larson, when he came out, the athletic director said, you know, we're going to move quickly. We're going to want to hire and fill this position. We don't want this lingering over our guys' heads during this playoff run. So the fact that they were able to get this done and they got Matt hired before the South Dakota State game, we found out about it. Ryan and I were actually standing next to each other getting ready to interview John Stiglmeyer the night before for our pregame show, and he said, oh, they hired Entz? Okay, like it was okay. They're gonna reload again. That's kind of the feeling I got from Stiglmeyer on that.
Yeah, I would agree. That does take me back to that day when everything kind of went down, and Stiglmeyer kind of went, dang it. I was hoping it would be somebody from outside the program, and you could kind of see him deflate a little bit. Like, here was our opening, and all of a sudden he got the feeling that they were just going to continue on. And I think from our side of things, it has felt like they've just continued on, and they continue to have that desire. No national championship T-shirts allowed on the football team. What's done is done. This is the new crop. We heard that a lot from Chris Klieman. We're hearing the same thing from the new head coach.
I don't think that was an easy decision either, and I haven't talked too much with Matt about it. But, you know, he wants to be a head coach, and obviously he's taken over the head coach of the best FCS program in the country. But when you think about, you know, Coach Klieman, Chris, he's making about 5 times as much money as he made here.
Oh, yeah, he had
Coach
a few reasons to leave.
I mean, Coach Klanderman, Coach Riley, everybody, they're all making 4 or 5 times more than they made here. Coach Entz could have been one of those guys. But, you know, at this point in his life, when is he ever going to have this opportunity? He's not. It's in front of him. And as he said, you know, to be the first time of a head coach at this level, at this program, at this time, how do you say no?
It's the same thing as Chris Kleiman when you look at it. Chris Kleiman was a lifetime assistant. Finally got his opportunity, made the most of it. Matt Entz is a lifetime assistant, 21 years as an assistant coach. The closest he's been to being a head coach was an associate head coach at Western Illinois. Now you get the chance to take over the reins of the most successful FCS program in the history of college football. Well, that's a lot of pressure, but at the same time, I think he feels like I am ready for this.
Well, and because Matt is obviously now the head coach, that opened up some openings, and with Courtney Messingham going with Chris Kleiman to Kansas State, so there are some new coordinators that the Bison have, and we'll take a look at them here. Tyler Roll moves from being the tight ends coach, if you will. He's still coaching the tight ends, but he is now the offensive coordinator. And Matt brings in a guy that he coached in college to be his defensive coordinator in David Braun.
We had the first opportunity, Brian and I did anyway, to talk with Coach Braun, and I can just tell you that from personal experience, you know, if first impressions, man, they were awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we're going to love having the opportunity to talk with this guy to help our preparations and during our games in the fall. But you talk about Coach Entz being ready. You get the feeling that David feels I'm ready as well to be able to call the defensive plays.
I would 100% agree with you. It was a really great conversation. Matter of fact, we probably went too long in our conversation with him, what we were scheduled for. But we just kind of ran down everything from his road here to him moving here with his family and getting adjusted to Fargo and how well that has gone, and Brenda Entz, Matt Entz, his wife, how much she has helped the transition with the new coaches' wives, trying to get their families intertwined in the community, which is equally as important as the guys getting used to life at the Fargo Dome and on the field. It's a totally different world when you're uprooting your family, when you have wives and children involved. And I think that has gone as seamless as possible. Talking to Noah Pauley, another one of the new assistants, former Minnesota Duluth offensive coordinator, he goes, late May is kind of my oasis. I know my wife is really looking forward to me being home because he's recruiting Florida, and he is leaving immediately after this game to get back on the road and get recruiting again.
Yeah, most of these coaches will be taking off sometime this weekend. A lot of them, like Brian mentioned, will be going on planes tomorrow or driving out on, or, you know, Coach Roll said, I'm leaving on, I think he said Monday. He'll be one of the later ones, most everybody else. But, you know, you talk about, you know, football is only played in the fall. Well, you might play games in the fall, but it is definitely a year-round job.
Well, let's not gloss over the fact that Tyler Roll, who is a Bison through and through, he played here at North Dakota State, but for him to get the keys of this offense and to be able to operate it, I think that is something that, you know, you probably dream is about as a kid growing up in West Fargo.
Tyler Roll is head coaching material. I think his progression is of that he someday will be a head coach, whether it's at North Dakota State or not. So this would make sense that he's in a position now to control that offense, and pretty unique that he gets a chance to now coordinate the offense that he played in. And it'll be interesting because he played under some unique play callers, and then last year learned from really a completely different type of play caller, in that it wasn't just power, it wasn't just middle screen, it wasn't just very vanilla stuff where it was punch you in the mouth and go. So it'll be interesting for me at least to see how much of Courtney Messingham Tyler takes, how much of Tim Polasek Tyler takes, and how much goes back into his roots. I think it's a natural progression, and I think you nailed it when you talked about family and community. He wants to be just that as well.
All right, we will step aside. When we come back, we will probably get into that discussion about those quarterbacks here for North Dakota State as the Green and Gold Preview Show rolls on here from the Fargo Dome. Welcome back to the Gate City Bank Bison Football Green and Gold Preview Show. It is time now for a Proseed game break with Chris Berg. Chris?
It's time for the Proseed Report. If you need seed, think Proseed. Join us today, the owner of Proseed, Keith Peltier. Great to have you back with us.
Yeah, good to be here.
Enjoy seeing you. So let's talk about some new Enlist soybeans you guys have.
Sure, Enlist soybeans. And Enlist is a combination of glufosinate, which is Liberty, glyphosate, which is Roundup, and 2,4-D choline, which is, 2,4-D. So that combination kills all those different kind of weeds. So it's another tool in the tool chest that the farmers can use in addition to Xtend and Liberty and plain Roundup for any kind of problem weeds that might be out there.
And you've got a limited supply of these beans, right?
We got a limited supply. You know, we had some, this year production in South America was kind of tough. So we got shorted in quite a few stuff, but there is some supply of stuff, so we should be good for this year. We're going to have a lot of seed stock, so next year we're going to have about as much as anybody wants.
So let's talk about planting season. It's coming up upon us. Obviously, it's wet in a lot of different areas. What do you see?
Yeah, we're late, of course. You know, last year we were going full blast about this time. And, but, you know, generally we're about maybe a week and a half away in the Red River Valley for the most part. Stuff will dry up. They're going in the central part of the state, western part of the state. So I think if we get in by the 1st of May, these guys have big equipment. They can go 24 hours. So, you know, they get the crop in a hurry. Boom, they're done, and then they're sitting around twiddling their thumbs waiting for to plant the next one. But they'll get her done.
And things look good as far as what you're hearing from across the state?
You know, yes. Generally speaking, yes. You know, the farm economy is so-so. You know, we'd be really in trouble if we didn't get that $1.60 market reflection from the federal government and soybeans. So really next year, I think, is going to be the big challenge, because literally all the stuff's going to be either break even or losing money if you do, you know, just an average budget on stuff.
So obviously the most important thing is how can people get a hold of you and make sure they get the right
yeah, we have 9 DSMs throughout the state, and you can look at the website www.proseed.net, and you know, we're in a lot of places, so pretty easy to get a hold of.
Anything else you want to answer?
Sure. You know, that we have the Right Choice program, which we've been kind of promoting, and the Enlist beans qualify for that. We're happy to be able to offer that program for everybody.
And as always, I want to say thank you for what you guys do for us.
Yes,
We appreciate
our pleasure.
what you guys do, so thank you, sir.
And go Bison, right?
Amen to that, right? Here we go, another national title season underway during the spring game. So again, check out Proseed.net. They've got a limited amount of these Enlist beans, so check them out there and stick around. Much more coming up for the NDSU spring game.
The Bison's still working on some red zone stuff right now, and obviously the gamesmanship that is afoot, we're not going to show you any of that because we don't want anybody else to really have that film until the fall. So that's what we're doing. Let's go now to Ryan Gellner with this Sanford Health injury report. Ryan?
Thank you, guys. It is the Sanford Health Injury Report, and it is Jason Balvich, the physician's assistant at Sanford Health, joining us today. And Jason, today we want to talk a little bit about, well, I don't want to call them couch potatoes, but those folks that are getting out for the first time because the weather is nice, the air is nice, and to be able to get out and do things is always good. But sometimes folks overdo it. That's when you see them in your office.
Correct. Yeah, some people, you know, springtime, they go spring fever and they want to get out, and they just kind of get right after it, you know, go on a 10-mile bike or, you know, go on a 2-mile walk, and probably should ease into that a little bit, you know, once they're getting a little bit older.
Those softball players, I would assume those are the guys that get out, try to throw the ball around. Heck, we've all done it. You overdo it that first day, those shoulders are going to flare up. Best thing there is still, I would assume, rest it, ice it, and take it easy for a little bit?
Yeah, you want to warm up properly before you're throwing the ball around typically. You know, a lot of rest is fine. Usually you're doing that in the fall, in the spring. But once you're kind of getting out there, getting ready, you know, warming up properly, stretching out, you know, loosening up the arm a little bit prior to doing those activities is good. If you get a little soreness, some anti-inflammatories usually help with that. But if it's getting worse, you know, come in and see us. We'll take care of you.
Those kids that are getting on the baseball field, on the soccer field for the first time, not probably as many injuries when you see them. Is it more heat exhaustion? Is it more muscles in the legs just not doing the things you'd expect them to do?
I would say, you know, with the early spring, you know, it's kind of cooler weather, you know, stretching out, warming up properly, those are always things that you should do. Coaches should be preaching that too. They've kind of gotten away from a lot of stretching and activities like that to more of those dynamic activities. So stretching is very important, warming up properly, staying loose. You don't want to go out and start running hard when you're not properly warmed up. So.
Now, the athletes we're seeing today, the NDSU football team, guys that are at it, almost 12 months out of the year, staying in shape, doing those things. You don't necessarily see the fatigued muscle in those folks just because they're so well conditioned. When they have injuries, you're seeing a lot of ACL type stuff and a lot of joint issues with those guys. Is there a difference, and a big difference, between someone that's training year round and then someone that's just getting up off the couch?
You know, I would say the athlete that trains year-round, it's always good to kind of take a break, you know, get away from it for a little bit, give your body a rest. You know, in high school, you see, you know, kids playing more multi-sport athletes. Those are good to kind of use other muscle groups and give your body a rest also. Those are good things to do for sure, yeah.
Never overlook an injury, though, I would assume, from your standpoint. If you think things are serious, your doors are open. People can come see you at Sanford Health.
Correct, yeah. There's the walk-in clinic at Sanford Health. There's scheduled appointments. You can get in to see pretty much one of the docs or one of the mid-level providers. We're always available to see athletes or the regular people as well.
Yeah, Sanford Health is there for each and every one of you, and hopefully you don't have to check them out, but if you do, hopefully you can help.
Yep, come see us, 25th Street.
It is the Sanford Health Injury Report, guys. A little bit of a news, I guess, for the Weekend Warrior. We'll get back to some game action in just a little bit, but for now, we'll send it from the hallway across the stadium to you guys.
All right, thank you very much, Ryan. Those Weekend Warriors. It's the rotator cuff. You know a thing or two about that.
Huh? Yeah, I'm rehabbing. I am rehabbing. In fact, when we saw Coach Roll and everybody, I grabbed my elbow to shake hands to make sure they didn't pull too hard.
Yeah,
on
there
the
you
shoulder.
go. Yeah, you don't need you to throw out your shoulder as we are getting into football season here in summertime. All right, let's take a look at the action on the field here. It looks like the Bison are going into, well, it looks like a little second down period as we see Holden Hotchkiss under center for the Bison.
Kid they've been really trying to get some weight on. He came in at 190 and they had some trouble his first couple years in the program, and now he is up over 200 pounds.
The Bison, of course, doing thud, not taking anybody to the ground here. No need to get anybody hurt here in April.
Here's a Nodak Insurance Company instant replay. They hand off to Ty Brooks, and there's the little thud, you know, because if this was full game, you would have saw Mr. Cox there putting Brooks to the ground. But that's, again, we talk a little bit about how especially spring football has changed. You're not getting any real big hits from anybody.
You know, and I wonder how excited Jabril Cox would be to put Ty Brooks into the ground.
Another guy that's
with a smile on his face.
Jabril Cox learning a different position this spring, moving him from Sam to Will, and just create some flexibility for the Bison.
Yeah, forcing Jabril to be a little bit uncomfortable in his role in trying to play in the middle with all those bodies. Well, there's a break in the action right now. Let's hear a word from Taco John's.
A taco with a cheesy quesadilla for a shell? That's a trick play if I've ever seen one. You got me real good, quesadilla taco. You got me real good.
Try our cheesy new quesadilla tacos in 4 bold flavors. Only today at Taco John's.
Trey Lanson at quarterback now for the Bison, and we got to see a little bit of what he brings to the table last year, playing in a couple games, still maintaining his red shirt with that new NCAA rule. And I know we've talked at length about that NCAA rule, but how beneficial that rule is, especially for a team like the Bison. That red shirt's just about every freshman that comes in.
Well, not just freshmen, but you know, Dimitri Williams took advantage of that. Logan McCormick took advantage of that. Guys who had played before. So you as a coaching staff have the opportunity and some versatility to be able to do that. And of course, it was, I think, really big for Dimitri Williams because he's making a position switch from wide receiver, where we saw him make some plays, into being a running back.
Yeah, plus, you know, when you're looking at records and those sorts of things, that's 4 extra games that you can add to the record totals. Trey Lance already has 2 touchdowns. He hasn't even officially played a snap yet.
His best touchdown came at the University of South Dakota. If you guys will remember, he fumbled that snap and then picked it up and ran it in, much to the surprise of, I think, everybody.
But this last play we just saw, Nodak Insurance Company instant replay, this is something that the Bison coaches are really working with Trey. They want him to be more decisive in what he does. So, you know, Easton Stick went through the same type of things. You want to analyze. You want to make the right read. You want to do the right thing. But if you don't do the right thing at the right time, it no longer becomes the right thing. And so that's one of the things that Trey Lance is working on. I mean, and when you talk about physical tools, nobody has more than number 5.
It's amazing to me when you look at him. You saw him running there. He does not look like a kid that's 226 pounds, does he? I mean, he still looks skinny. And that's just his frame right now. He's already packed on that much weight. And he has a lot of room to grow and still get bigger and develop. And I think he could be scary in the next couple of years to see where he ends up physically.
Coach Hedberg was telling me a story last year about Trey Lance when he was in high school. He said if the same play would have happened in college, he'd have got thrown out for targeting. But Trey Lance played safety as well at Marshall High School, and boy, he would like to line up and light up kids that he played from that safety position as well, just to show you the competitive nature and the physicality that he can have.
And a coach's kid, very mature for his age. We've heard that a lot.
All right, we will step aside here as the Green and Gold, the spring preview show, rolls on from here at the Fargo Dome. Welcome back to the Gate City Bank Bison Football Green and Gold preview show as the Bison are wrapping up spring practice here at the Fargo Dome. Let's go to the sidelines, and we join Ryan Gellner with a Shields sideline report. Ryan?
Yeah, guys, Chris Board was a 3-time national champion for North Dakota State, started 11 games at linebacker his senior season, and is now with the Baltimore Ravens. Just completed his rookie season for the Ravens. Flew back today. You're back to Baltimore tomorrow or this weekend. What a whirlwind.
Definitely came back to see the guys and watch them play, and definitely come back support. So
the last year for you, almost a year ago, you were at the ring ceremony. Then the NFL draft happened. During the draft, you got a phone call from the Ravens. Take us through that.
Yeah, probably around 4 or 5, they called me, told me they wanted me to come and join them as a free agent, and I kind of was a little hesitant, kind of evaluating my options to see what other teams were interested. So definitely I called and told them I definitely wanted to come up and if they'd have me. So, yeah.
As a free agent, to get an invite like that, you probably knew right away that you'd have to prove yourself, and special teams was going to be a place to do it. You did exactly that this year.
Yeah, definitely. I knew coming in I'd be pretty much at the bottom of the roster, and I had to work my way up and earn a spot. So, and I know special teams was something I was really good at, especially here at NDSU. So I knew that was definitely going to be my way in to the NFL, so for sure.
When you look back at your North Dakota State career, it wasn't headline after headline. You were a solid player. You were able to get it done on special teams. You stood out there. How does a guy like you end up in the NFL? Obviously, it's a lot of hard work, but when you look back at it, how'd you end up in the NFL?
Definitely just kind of making the best opportunity that I got. When they brought me in, they knew I was going to be a special teams guy, and just taking that and expanding that role, and that really helped me, propelled me, and get myself to where I'm at right now. So it's definitely it's been one heck of a year. So.
Final question I'll ask you is, all that hard work you've put in, worth it?
It definitely was worth it, for sure. It definitely was.
It's been fun to see you excel. It's been fun to have another Bison in the NFL. Congratulations on what you've done. Good luck in year number 2.
Thank you so much.
Guys, that's Chris Board in the NFL right now, checking out his boys at North Dakota State. Back to you.
All right, thanks, Ryan. That is certainly one of the guys that when we were going through all the guys that got picked up by NFL teams, you see Chris Board's name come across and you go, okay, I was not expecting that one. But hats off to Chris Board, and it's so much fun to watch him on Sundays. And, you know, he had a big Thursday night game, I remember, as well. Last season.
With the NFL draft going on right now, and all these kids, they want to get drafted, and how great it is to have a team pick them. But when you start to get to the tail end of that draft, Chris Board's a real good example of sometimes that being an undrafted free agent, you have the opportunity to go to a team or a situation that best fits what you can do for them. Chris kind of fit in that role, and he got an opportunity. So as disheartening as it might be not to get drafted, sometimes that's one of the better things that can happen.
I want to take you back to Chris Board's sophomore season, when he was inserted as the starting strong safety, he played about 5 games, and it did not go well at all, and they moved him to linebacker. His story could have ended there. He could have said, I'm not going to accept this. I'm going to transfer. I'm going to go somewhere where I can play safety. He hung back, played, got hurt, got replaced by a guy by the name of Jabril Cox in the lineup. Never really got back on the field until Levi Jordheim got hurt, and then was able to come back and play. Led North Dakota State in special teams tackles the last 6 weeks. Had nothing handed to him. Jerry Rosberg was here on Pro Day, then the special teams coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. He saw something in Chris Board, saw something in the film, and he came out and absolutely took every advantage of his opportunity as an undrafted free agent. You'd have to say maybe the most unlikely player in North Dakota State history, certainly in recent history, to make an NFL roster coming from the situation he did here at the Bison.
Well, and you think about that linebacker class, that was Nick. And Nick was the only guy. Nick DeLuca was the only guy that we thought was going to make it from that Code Green defense that was going to be in the NFL. Now, Nick did make it in the NFL, not with the team he originally went to. Mind you, he had kind of that similar situation where, you know, Nashville picked him up, and Tennessee picked him up. They said, hey, we want you to come here, but we're going to make you a tight end. And then they cut him, and then Jacksonville picks him up. And
it's one of those things, too, with Nick. When he got a start last year, he got it because he could play all 3 linebacker positions. He learned Will, he learned Sam, he learned Mike.
Where did he learn
was
them?
versatile.
Here.
He learned them all here. That's why Jabril Cox is learning Will linebacker. That's why Chris Board is a guy in the Baltimore Ravens. He's versatile. He can play middle or either side. And that is really important, I think, when you're coming from the college ranks, understanding more than just one position that you're playing.
I'm not saying that this kid will take the same path into the NFL, but there's a young man wearing number 3s in his 5th year in the program, Jackson Brown. He is going to take a similar path with the Bison because he came and was recruited as a defensive back, had some opportunities there. He was not healthy all the time. He is now making that transition, much like Board did, into a linebacker role. And I tell you, Jackson Brown's going to play a lot of linebacker for this Bison team. I was talking with Coach Olson, the linebacker coach, earlier this week, and he said that Brown, he understands the concepts already of the linebacker position now so much better than when spring started and when he made that transition last year. And so you see Chris Board, hey, number 3 Jackson Brown's going to take a similar path here.
And a special teams ace.
Oh, yeah,
like
he
Chris
was
Board, too.
Yeah.
He's been a
Tremendous
really
special
good special teamer.
Yep.
Absolutely. You mentioned Coach Olson, that is Grant Olson, who is one of the new faces that has joined the Bison this year, obviously with the coaching change that brought up an opportunity for a lot of new guys to come in. We already talked about David Braun as the DC coach. He is also coaching safeties as well. A.J. Blazek is a guy that comes over from Rutgers. We see Dan Larson in here as the running backs coach. Cody Morgan was with the staff before as an offensive quality control coach, and now he's got his own position group to coach now with the defensive backs. Noah Pauly, you talked about him earlier, coming from Duluth, and there's Grant coming back from Indiana State, back to his old stomping grounds here in Fargo. Of these guys that come in here, obviously everybody knows who Grant Olson is, and you guys got a chance to catch up with Grant a little bit today, correct?
I just said hi with him real quick today. I talked to him on the phone earlier this week. Yeah.
Yes, so he obviously knows what Bison is all about, what being an NDSU Bison is all about. These guys, the 3 or the 4 really with David Braun, they are having to learn about this culture.
I think Coach Braun made a real good example of a guy that we know well, and you guys that know at home know. Well, Jimmy Football, they call him, James Hendricks. Because Coach Braun would say we would be in particular drill, and he would look for, all right, James, how did you guys do this last year? You coached the coach for a little bit. While I can help do everything, are we seeing stuff on the same path? And so Coach Braun talked a lot about how his growth this spring has been so important, and a lot of players like James Hendricks have helped him do that.
Well, obviously the biggest thing is communication, making sure that what you're saying is being understood by the players and the language that you're speaking. That's the biggest thing, and that's why he said was one of the things that he wanted to get down in this spring practice during these 15 spring practices was that he and his guys were all on the same page when it comes to calling plays and making sure that, you know, whatever technique they're talking about the same thing in the same way.
Yeah, and I think that's always the biggest key with new coaches is terminology, verbiage. You know, some people want to insert their own things, and then the coaches currently on staff necessarily don't want to do that, so it's all about getting everybody speaking the same language, and that's why you see like guys like Randy Hedberg, Tyler Roll, all these guys on headsets. It's important for them to get these reps as well of what it's going to be like in a game-like situation, because, again, until these guys all put on the headsets at the same time for a game, they're not going to know exactly what it's like from a communication standpoint. There's not a lot of comfort there. That all being said, these guys all have a good pedigree of where they come from, and a lot of them, you even know Paulie, that guy's called plays for 3 years.
Yeah.
Now he's a receivers coach, and even something that Tyler Rowe brought up, he's doing a great job teaching our receivers how to block. You know, things that you never know what guys are going to bring to the table.
This looks like some of the twos going here in a live scrimmage situation for the Bison, and that's what was scripted, at least for us, that they would be going through some of the scrimmage plays here. But to go back to the point of putting the headsets on and talking, I was at a practice earlier this spring, and for whatever reason, it was towards the end of practice, the Bison were going through some scrimmage-like situations, and Tyler Roll was at the complete opposite end of the Dakota Field bubble, all by himself with nobody else around him. And the reason for that, I talked to Coach Entz afterwards, and he said, well, he's never called plays from a headset before, so we wanted to get him as far away from possible, like he would be up in the booth. And that's not something you really
think he's in
about.
the booth here today.
I'm pretty sure he's in the booth upstairs getting those play calls down, and that's another reason that they want to work on this stuff, and you only get the 15 opportunities to do that. So that's kind of why they're doing what they're doing today, is a chance for them to feel like it's a game and just get those little hidden things that you don't think about necessarily on Saturdays when you lace them up.
And there's a cadence to a coaching communication tree on headset. And these guys are going to have to find that. It takes a little time to get used to who's talking when, who's talking then, and figure it all out. There's a guy that can help everybody because he has been around a long time. He has called plays.
He's been a head
all
coach,
over the place. He's been a head coach. And I was really glad to see Randy get the associate head coach because he is having a ball. This, from what he told me, is the best place he's worked. He's having the most fun ever, and he gets to recruit his home state, which makes it even 10 times better than that.
So we talked about some of the new coaches that came up, and let's talk about some of the guys that did stick around for this Bison coaching staff. We talked about, Randy Hedberg. He's stick around. He's still going to be coaching the quarterbacks, and he got that associate head coach title added to him. Tyler Roll, obviously. Nick Gazer is a very important one, I think, because he sticks around and he's going to coach special teams. And we saw how important special teams was to the Bison last year when Chris Klieman put an emphasis on we're going to do special teams and we're going to make sure that we're not losing the hidden yards, as he always called it. So having a good special teams coordinator and Gazer's obviously, a great coach that's been here for a while. He'll split his time between defensive tackles and coaching the special teams. But him sticking around, and Buda Williams as well, you have that entire defensive line, which, let's be real, was nasty last year. That was a nasty defensive front. So you still have the continuity there.
Darius Shepard, we saw him make plays and get those yards. But those things don't happen by accident. You have to work on them. And you're right, I think an emphasis on special teams sometimes gets a little bit overlooked about the impact that special teams can have on a game.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think we saw that last year with even the net yardage. A guy like Garrett Wagner probably did not get enough credit. I mean, you think about how special teams almost cost North Dakota State the national championship against James Madison with some of the things that happened. Last year it was a strength in the return game, in the coverage units. They were really solid. North Dakota State, when you can put teams on long fields, right? Defensively, it's hard to drive the entire field against the Bison defense. So if you can pin teams back, special teams is the way you do that.
Well, and you talk about a transition from the way Coach Klieman administered a game, and now we'll see. We don't know yet how Coach Entz will do it, because there are a lot of times where you'd sit there and be going, oh, Chris, it's 4th and 2. Just go for it. And what would he do? No, he'd punt it because that other team would go back inside because of Wagner, and inside the 10. You flip the field, and you force a team who's not capable of putting a 13, 14, 15 play drive together, force a team to do that, and they can't, and then that was an advantage. So yeah, you're right, and that's one of the things as a head coach for Matt. I'll see how aggressive he is in certain game situations. We won't find that out until we're televising games in the fall.
Now we're getting to see a little bit of the action here. There's Sabian Clark on the handoff there, and we will talk about some of the guys that we think are going to have big years next year coming up a little bit later in the show. So we see this Nodak Insurance Company replay, Clark getting the handoff. But this is a kid that I
know you like him.
Like.
Coach Roll likes him too, because he said today to Brian and I, he meaning Tyler, he said, Sabian Clark reminds me of Kyle Steffes.
The way he runs.
In the way he runs. His ability to be a slasher. And the other thing that he proved in the 4-game red shirt that Clark got last year, that Coach Roll said, is that, that he proved to us that he will run hard. And will do those types of things.
And he's big, too. That's the thing. To me, he seems like a... okay, we're going for it here. That's Dustin Kozowski on the touchdown reception there. But one of the things that I liked about Sabian Clark and who he reminds me of is a little bit like Bruce. Bruce Anderson, probably a little bit faster than Sabian Clark at this point, but a big back, and the Bison are replacing 2 big backs that they need to have that void filled. So Sabian Clark, I think, is a kid that can step in. And well, obviously, we'll talk about him a little bit later there, but what we're seeing here is a little fun. It's some full tackle-on football that we've got.
I like it. James Kaiser with a nice little whack at the end of that play, even though he knows he was getting it. That's a position group, too. I know that we're talking mostly about offense, but it's going to be real interesting with those 3 sophomore safeties, especially with Weber and Kaiser and Tutsi. I think are 3 kids that are all going to find their way onto making a lot of plays next year.
And important, I think, from what we talked about David Braun today, is we need to make sure we find at least 2 guys that can play the nickel and play inside in the slot in those situations.
It's one of the biggest question marks, nickel.
With Jalen Wimbush gone and Jalen Allison gone. Now, Marquise Bridges, I think we feel like he can do it, but can we get Dawson Weber in there where we feel comfortable enough for at least some situations and some looks to put him in? And there's other guys, I think, that are also in that mix.
Is that something that a Jackson Brown could possibly fit in?
Maybe, but they need linebackers. And that goes back to some of the stuff we were talking about earlier with Jabril Cox and making him a little uncomfortable in terms of having to play defense, in and among the box, because Cox was able to slide out and play a lot of that nickel as well.
Destin Talbert's another guy that's in that mix.
Well, while there's a break in the action, let's get ourselves a word from Shields.
You've waited all winter for this. We can't wait either.
Back here at the Fargo Dome, we see Noah Sanders getting ready to go under center here. We're seeing a little bit of this scrimmage action as the Bison are showing a few run plays. Adam Cofield getting a handoff. We saw a lot from Cofield last year as well because, well, Bruce wasn't really 100% throughout the course of the year, so Cofield had to really step in. And even though some of the games that he played in, the games were out of hand at that point, but we saw some things out of him. Missouri State comes to mind for me.
I like his ability to run in tight quarters. I think that was the one thing that in that 8-gap power type of a scheme, he seems to fit that fairly well.
Yeah, one guy that I always felt did a nice job of keeping his shoulders square all the time to the line of scrimmage, but still moving side to side was John Crockett. I don't know if there's another guy I saw that did as well as he did. Cofield has that ability when he gets into a hole to just keep his shoulders square, but still move to get where he's going in a hurry.
All right, we are going to step aside, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some of those impact players that we think are going to have a big year next year for the Bison. That's still to come here on the Gate City Bank Bison Football Green and Gold Preview Show. Welcome back to the Gate City Bank Bison Football Green and Gold Preview Show here at the Fargo Dome. We were talking about it a little bit in the last segment. Let's get into it, and we'll take a look at our Farmers Union Insurance impact players. And I will go ahead and start since I'm on this side of the table and I'm talking. So we'll go with my guy. I've gone with Sabian Clark. He's from Sioux City, Iowa. Played a lot of games there at Bishop Heelan High School. 4 games last year for the Bison, only 14 carries. He had the 91 yards, 1 touchdown in garbage time, really, against Southern Illinois. But I really like how he runs the football. I think he is going to be, and honestly, it's just 4 games into his career, I think he is going to be a problem for defenses across the Missouri Valley Football Conference. And that's why I've picked Sabian Clark as my Farmers Union Insurance impact player. LT?
My Farmers Union Insurance impact player, I was going to pick Cordell Volson, but we were picking people who were playing today.
Actually, participating
today. So
yes.
I went with number 52. His name is Jackson Hankey, and we know him well in North Dakota. He's from Park River. Walked onto this Bison program in 2017 and played meaningful reps last year with his 27 tackles. He was the high school player of the year. We know a lot of that. You see the bottom thing there with his mom and his dad, NDSU graduates. He has NDSU kind of in his blood, and the family does as well. The one thing I found interesting talking with Coach Hedberg about him, he said he came to our one-day camp and then injured an ankle early on. So NDSU did not have a very good evaluation at that time of Jackson, which is one of the reasons he walked on. But he's a multi-sport athlete. He was a 6-year letter winner in high school in baseball, played quarterback his senior year at Park River, had 26 touchdowns from that high school position, and the 2-time state champion. And the thing that probably sticks out more than anything, he is #1 graduate in his class at Park River and an academic Olympian from the state champion team. So he's a very smart kid. What do smart kids have to do? Know his job, what everybody else's job is. What does a middle linebacker have to do? He's going to do it. And I thought one of the things that was real interesting with Coach Brown today when we talked with him, he said he has the respect of his teammates already. And so Jackson Hankey, number 52, he's my impact player. He will be an impact player this fall.
I would have to agree with you, LT. I'm excited to see what the steps Jackson Hankey can take. And this, again, I remember Matt Entz telling us last year, we didn't know what we had in Jackson Hankey until about 4 months into the program because he wasn't in shape. He was playing baseball up until he got here.
And a really smart kid, well-spoken kid as well. We've interviewed him a few times for various things. Very well-spoken kid, smart kid.
One more thing before I pass the torch. Coach Hedberg said they were at a Bison deal down in Arizona, and it was during the wintertime, and all of a sudden here come 2 people in their 52 garb, and it was Jackson's grandpa and grandma, and they wanted to support their grandson and support Bison football down in Arizona. So Bison roots with that family run deep.
Very, very deep, but as deep as anybody's, I'd have to say. My Farmers Union Insurance impact player, I'm going to go with a guy out of Indianapolis, Indiana, Michael Tutsi.
Can be really, really good.
I think he is the next coming and has such similar skill sets to what Robbie Grimsley was here. Warren Central High School, 4-year starter. Warren Central High School is perennial a top 25 nationally ranked program in high school. This guy played at a high level against really good competition, knows what it's like to win. When he got reps, when he had to fill in, had the 2 interceptions, has good ball skills, very good on special teams. His father is a defensive backs coach at Marian University, has a lot of football roots, tough kid. We talked to David Braun today about Tutsi, and he said the one thing that stood out to him is he's not a kid you necessarily want to overcoach because he has such good instincts the way he is, very similar to the way Robbie Grimsley did, that you kind of just want to turn him loose and let him play mind games with the quarterback a little bit by some of the things he can do in the movement game. So he's a guy I think that's going to have a chance to be a guy that really plays well, has some big numbers here in his sophomore season.
Colton Hegel also had many of those same things that you were just talking about, the instincts of playing that position.
He was all right.
He was really good.
Right. My Farmers Union Insurance player to watch this year, it starts and it ends with the kicker. And the kicker doesn't have a lot of statistics right now, but that's something that's going to come for this young man. His name is Jake Reinholz, and he's from Fargo, a graduate of Fargo Shanley, a stud soccer player in high school. And kicking-wise, he's a little bit of an unknown for North Dakota State. 3 of 3 last year on extra points. He's never kicked a field goal in college, so there's a lot of untestedness, if that's a word, about this guy. And I think the best is yet to come. He kicked a 41-yarder in high school, which around here, that's a long ways in high school. He's got a leg. He's an all-conference. He was the senior athlete of the year in soccer, 2017, coming from Fargo Shanley. And you know what? He's got the head for it, and I think maybe that's the most important thing. He's not only got the leg, he's got the head for it. Majors in mechanical engineering. He's on the all-conference, all-smarts team. Just a good kid. And I think when you come in and you have to take over for someone like Cam Peterson, I think it's not only skill, but I think it's what's between the ears as well. And I think he's got a lot of that. Bison football fans will get to know him one way or the other He'll be kicking, more than likely, kicking off and then kicking extra points and field goals.
And you mentioned that's such a thankless job, the kicker. You either do your job and everybody says, well done doing your job, or you don't do your job. Yep. And this is a failed high school football kicker. That is a soapbox that I will get on, but that is for another time. But yes, Jake Reinholz could have
to the right,
probably
to the left.
But it'll go over the goalpost. We'll stop.
It's not going over the goalpost. All right.
Our Impact players there, brought to you by Farmers Union Insurance. We will step aside. We come back. We'll take a look ahead of what is to come for this Bison football team as we get set to wrap up spring practice here at the Fargo Dome. Welcome back to the Fargo Dome, the Gate City Bank Bison Football Green and Gold Preview Show. The Bison wrapping up spring practice. A cheer from the crowd here, as I believe that was Holden Hotchkiss that just ran one.
Off the wheels.
That's something you see every day. Holden Hotchkiss showing off the wheels. They were only like 5 yards out.
I think he does have a rushing touchdown, though.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
And Coach Hedberg did say he's a much improved runner over last year at this time.
Yeah, he is one of the 4 guys vying to be the starting quarterback for North Dakota State as they get set to open up this schedule. And this is a weird schedule this year because every so often you're allowed to play 12 games in the FCS. We're normally used to 11, and we get to play 12 this year with the Bison. And it starts off somewhere incredibly fun at the end of August down there at Target Field. The Bison take on Butler. How cool is that going to be?
Not for Butler, but because they're not very good and they're going to get killed.
They did beat Youngstown last year in Youngstown, so let's not put it past let's not put it past Butler now.
Sorry, Butler. But, no, it'll be fun, and we'll get an opportunity to televise it for you. If you can't get down to Target Field and watch that particular game, we'll bring it. And then, of course, that second team on the schedule. So in terms of before conference, it's a couple interesting tests there. A road trip out to Delaware.
It's weird what you get to do in this business. In one calendar year, I'll call a basketball game in a football stadium and a football game in a baseball stadium.
Exactly.
Who would have thought that? Right? It's a weird deal.
It is a weird deal. Butler, obviously that game is going to have a lot of fanfare. Some 40,000 people they're expecting to be down there, and that's just inside the stadium. I'm assuming there's probably going to be a fair amount more just outside of Target Field in their green and gold.
When you talk about the recruiting area or the recruiting footprint for North Dakota State, and we're not just talking athletics, we're talking students and everything. I mean, it's heavy into the Twin Cities, which of course will be a magnet for all of that as well.
But we'll step away from that Butler game for a second. You do get to play North Dakota. You get a chance to see what a future Missouri Valley Football Conference member. They will join the conference in 2020, so you will get a chance to see them. That return trip to Delaware. Delaware was a playoff team from a year ago. They didn't look like it when they were here in the Fargo Dome early in the season, but they turned it around and they were a playoff team last year. And then you get to see another seeded playoff team with UC Davis coming here to the Fargo Dome. This is an eclectic mix of a non-conference schedule as I've ever seen. You're playing a lot of different style teams here, and you get the fun of a Target Field game.
It's probably the most difficult non-conference schedule right now on paper, next to the one we saw a few years ago when the Bison started here against Charleston Southern, and then had to play Eastern Washington. Had Iowa on the schedule, and the Bison came out of that 3-0, but they were really bruised up after those 3 games. This is going to be a really fun season. Look who you got at home: Northern Iowa, then Youngstown State on the road, Western Illinois here, Southern Illinois here. This is going to be a fun road for North Dakota State this year in this 12-game schedule. They did a nice job setting this up.
Had 2 Brookings, which will be a really good game in the conference, and then even the starter having to go right off the bat. Brock Spack always has a real good Redbird team, so you're not going to start with a pushover in the league at all either.
Yeah, that's obviously, as you look down at this, you get the home games against Western Illinois and South Dakota there to end. And I don't know that there's anybody more excited that is a home game against Western Illinois than the 2 gentlemen sitting next to me, because they don't have to sit outside in Western Illinois' stadium there in Macomb.
It was an experience I can tell my daughter about down the road.
You'll never forget that one.
It's on TV, so I will always have it.
Yeah, you guys were in the on the sideline. I don't really know
the 5-yard line
at
the top of the stadium, and thank goodness John from Token Creek went out to the lumber store and built the little set to put all the equipment on, and that it didn't rain.
But real quick, as we get through this conference schedule, we were going to chat about this a little bit, but we got some game action that we showed. So the Missouri Valley Football Conference is going to look pretty different next year. We talked a little bit about the quarterback situation for North Dakota State. They're not the only ones in this boat that have to replace a quarterback.
There's a lot of really good quarterbacks not around. Yep.
The 4 guys that I singled out were Eli Dunn from Northern Iowa. He is gone. Sean McGuire from Western Illinois, who was a great quarterback, I thought. I mean, he really didn't have much help out there at Western Illinois, but he was a great quarterback. And then Taryn Christian and Easton Stick, 2 guys that set the conference on fire with their quarterback play. So those are guys that are not going to be in the Missouri Valley Football Conference next year. That's a lot of talent that you have to replace across the board.
And I know especially McGuire, to me, he was one of the more impressive guys. Big, tall kid. He could take a beating, and he got one when he played at NDSU. And he was able to step up there. Dunn.
He got hit a lot.
He got
the guys in green and gold.
Yes. But and Taryn Christian is one of the better athletes, I think, regardless of position
he's got all kinds of
NDSU has
records,
that has played against. And yeah, so obviously that's a huge hole for South Dakota State to try to see what happens there. South Dakota State and NDSU was in a really solid recruiting tussle to get Zeb Nolan. The Bison won that. Number 8 is here instead of down in Brookings.
I believe they were in a pretty good recruiting tussle for Trey Lance as well, and Trey came here to Fargo. So, yeah, it's very, very interesting how things will play out. That 12-game schedule, that's also another thing that is very interesting. That, that's another game. Sure, the Bison are used to playing 16 games, but this could potentially be a 17-game season. Yeah. You never know.
When you talk about that, you talk about where's your depth. And one of the biggest things I think we overlook a little bit from the NDSU team last year, they did not miss a start in the starting offensive lineman group.
Unbelievable.
I mean, to be as physical as those kids have to be, and every week they answered the bell. So when you add that extra game in this year, and where's some of that depth going to be, those are some things that these coaches are spending a lot of time trying to figure out.
So we are efforting to go get Matt Entz here, as he has decided to have practice run just a few moments later than we anticipated.
Coaches never do that, do they?
No, never. Why would they ever try to get a little bit extra out of the
If we
parameters?
have a few extra minutes before we have to go off at the top of the hour, then we will get an opportunity to talk with Coach.
And we see him there getting talked to by Ryan Peralta. Hey, come over and talk to Ryan Gellner here so we can get this going. And it looks like, the coach has won that battle. It doesn't look like he's going to step aside and talk to us. So, but this has got to be a very exciting time for Bison fans. Obviously, with the game at Target Field, we don't get to see the banner raising until that game against North Dakota. And I think a lot of NDSU fans would be pretty excited about hanging up that banner while North Dakota makes the trip down I-29. So we are going to go, I believe, over to Ryan Gellner. We're not sure that coach has quite made his way over there yet, as we are going to try to talk to Matt. We got him. All right, let's go to Ryan Gellner.
Matt, thanks for joining us, first of all, in the last just couple minutes. 15 practices. You got spring. In the next couple of minutes, you'll be done. Wrap up a spring. Your first one, how'd it go?
It went well. It was a learning experience for me and for a number of our younger players, and then you throw in a handful of new coaches. There's a lot of people learning, adjusting to new roles, and it was good. It was good. I felt like since about the Friday or Wednesday before Easter till now, we've continually getting better. Feels like every day we're out there, and so excited to see the end of spring, all the improvement, especially with our younger players, finally understanding how to practice, the tempo of practice, the expectations of meetings and all that. Just they needed more reps, and that's what we did, and I'm excited going into the summer.
Is there one thing that you have learned as a head coach in those 15 weeks, or maybe even today, that comes to the top of your head?
Still just detail-oriented. It's all about the little things, and don't forget those as the head coach. The little things that made Code Green special the last 5 years have to still be the details that we put into our work. Me learning the offensive terminology. I used to kind of know it from a defensive side, a real quick general as I looked at scripts. Now I need to understand why they're doing things, why they're motioning, trade shift, and all those things that are encompassing with our offense. But for our coaches, just keep coaching the little things. I think that's what separates us from a lot of other places.
We promised we'd keep it quick. I'll let you go, Matt. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Have a great night.
That is the new head coach at North Dakota State, Matt Entz. Guys.
All right, and that is what will do it for us here at the Fargo Dome. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you this fall for Bison football. Have a great evening, everybody.